Hello, everybody. My name's Timothy Halloran, and we're talking about the Pluto in Scorpio generation. And this is going to be a general look at this generation. Obviously, when you're looking at Pluto, it very much depends on the individual aspects, the entire chart, the houses that they fall into to really get an idea of the unique and individual story. Today, we're going to be taking a very general glance at this entire time period when Pluto was in Scorpio around 1984 to 1995. And so just a general disclaimer, first of all, this should be at the front of all of my presentations, is I'm a perfectly imperfect human being. There's good room for imperfections in some of these ideas. Also, again, very general presentation in terms of talking about Scorpio. So we can go ahead and start to look at some of these charts at the front of the presentation. I included some of the major cycles that are beginning and ending while Pluto is in Scorpio, because we're having some very long-term cycles that are really closing and beginning with this generation, including the Neptune-Uranus cycle, which is a nearly 171-year cycle. There's also a Saturn-Neptune 36-year cycle beginning and ending, and a Saturn-Uranus around 45-year cycle, beginning and ending roughly all around the same years, between 1988 and 1993. We have these cycles beginning and closing in Capricorn. And so not only do we have the Pluto in Scorpio generation, which we're going to talk about, is really a group of souls which is here to change and transform much of what we're seeing on the planet. And I think that this is a relevant topic for what's going on today in the world, and also because there's a lot of Pluto talk today. So anyways, I'm not seeing those slides, but we can just sort of generally talk about what's going on during this time. When Pluto is in Scorpio, Jupiter begins in Sagittarius, makes a full cycle all the way around the zodiac, comes back to Sagittarius during this time that Pluto's transiting Scorpio. Saturn moves from the end of Libra into Pisces. So throughout this generation, we also have Saturn transiting the outer signs. And so these souls are structuring outer signs, which have to do with the collective, which has to do with the integration of new ideals, new realities into form. And if you're having trouble with that, Linda, maybe I can switch to my own screen.
Yes, Timothy, I have the slides up, but I don't know why you can't see them. So yes, I'll stop my share and then you can start yours. But
okay.
Just give us one moment.
We'll give that a shot.
You can go ahead now.
Here, all right. Okay, now if I have used PowerPoint more, it'd probably be useful. Is it coming through okay?
Yes, it's coming through. Would you like to use a full screen?
How do I do that? Is there a shortcut?
Yep, go to View on the above menu. View on the yes, and then click on Reading View, which is the fourth one along, Reading View.
Oh, okay. Here we go. Perfect. Okay, thank you, Linda. Okay, so anyways, here is when Pluto enters in. I know my chart's a little weird with some of the zodiac signs coming into the wheel, but we see Saturn's at the beginning of Scorpio and is going to transit into Pisces towards the end of the Pluto-Scorpio transit. Here's the Saturn-Uranus cycle, which is beginning at the end of Sagittarius. There was 2 conjoinments in 1988 between Saturn and Uranus. And so this is the structuring of new ideas, new philosophies, new truths. Then we've got Saturn-Neptune in Capricorn, structuring new traditions, new ideals. And then finally the Uranus-Neptune, which is in 1993. So this whole period, 1988 to 1993, this is a period where there are souls coming in that are directly confronting old cycles, old belief systems, old paradigms, and are transitioning them. And in particular, the Uranus-Neptune cycle, which is again a 171-year cycle. You can even look up until this point in 1993. This is where the balsamic conjunction between Uranus and Neptune is taking place. These souls are kind of diving into, with the shovels, spades, You know, we're carrying a lot of these heavy-duty, preparing to blow up the old through confronting the old, being born into the old paradigm, confronting the old paradigm. And then post-1993, these souls are more so carrying these new seeds and somewhat figuring it out as they go along as well. And so I want to not spend too much time on that because I want to have time for questions at the end if there are any. So we're going to talk about Pluto and Scorpio in general now. And what I think perfectly summarizes the Scorpio Plutonian energy is the Agori here, who are, you know, a Hindu branch that worships Shiva in some of his most ferocious forms, as well as Kali. And this is a left-hand ascetic path. I mean, they break taboos. They do things that are incredibly profane. They are completely rejected by most Hindus as being untouchable. I mean, they're doing things such as eating the flesh out of the funeral pyres, eating shit, you know, doing whatever is considered taboo as their means of achieving liberation, which is rather intense type of tantra here, which is about confronting the full spectrum experiences of life in order to merge with the uniformity of everything. There is no such thing as profanity. Everything is divine, is sort of the master's path of the Agori here. And so this is, we don't want to say that all Pluto and Scorpio souls have had their past lives in the cremation grounds necessarily, but it does sort of encapsulate this past experiences of full spectrum, considerably intense confrontations with death, confrontations with the darkness, confrontations with the karmic complexity of life. There is that type of intensity that goes on with the Scorpio-Pluto generation. And this generation has also been merging with particular symbols that represent that type of transcending beyond power, confronting death, confronting fear, and moving beyond these things has been somewhat established. And so, past life themes have to do with domination, submissiveness, being in power, being without power, being ruled over by oppressors. This is the age of Pisces that we've been dealing with in the past as well. And there has in general been a merging with and a colliding with other souls in very dramatic and intense ways. And this has caused a lot of intense, fast-paced evolution. This can also be past life catastrophic experiences causing that fast-paced evolution. Identification with the occult, again with symbols that are transcendental, reminding us of a truth that is beyond duality, beyond pleasure and pain. And there's a direct confrontation of darkness, such as the relationship between good and evil. And this is war. You know, innocent souls on one side of the battlefield, innocent souls on the other side of the battlefield, sometimes, you know, somehow getting into this circumstance where there's collision, there's fighting. And this is revealing and directly confronting some of these dynamics of what is good and evil. And I think the Bhagavad Gita is a tremendous illustration of this, where we have Krishna being just like, yeah, there's souls on either side, but this is just arranged. This is how it's going to be. This is the divine dance. This is the divine play. And this is how it's all going to play out. But don't worry, ultimately, at the end of the day, I wreck all of the souls on either side. Everybody comes back into my mouths. I devour everybody on either side. This is death. This is reality. This is that ultimate confrontation with these themes. And so the Pluto and Scorpio generation, we have redundantly gone through such experiences so much that there is this subconscious relating to that theme of life simply being how life is. And as you probably know, the Pluto evolutionary work of moving towards the Pluto polarity point, which we'll talk about is in Taurus for this generation, is relatively not consciously worked towards by the majority of souls, because so many redundant lifetimes have occurred that it's just unconsciously accepted that this is how life is. And so the Pluto and Scorpio generation have this unique way of being comfortable in hell, comfortable in the frying pan, comfortable in this world which we are now so apparently seeing, where it is intense, where there are oppressors, where there is a near apocalyptic type of situation. And so what we're going to talk about is how this generation of souls is having their Saturn returns going on from 2013 until 2025. And since we were just talking about America and how these changes are going on in the world, well, this generation is going to be coming alive through many of these experiences in our world that seem so edge of apocalypse, that seem so life or death. These life experiences are not unfamiliar to us. This is actually where we have a strange, oh, okay, back once again. All right, well, I guess I'll set up camp here and do my thing. And I think we're going to see many of this generation, certain souls, really step up to the plate and come alive throughout this next decade as this group is going through their Saturn returns. Because in the past lives, there's been so much intensity. And there's just this unconscious, life is grotesque. And so, it's like unconsciously we go into sex and drama and partying because it's actually most familiar to us and most comfortable. And so I'm going to really quickly play, if it's going to let me, because now there's boxes in the way. Okay. This is dubstep music. Dubstep music, yes. This is very comfortable music for a lot of people in my generation. I'm just going to play it for a little second there because I can't take too much longer than it. But this music really sounds, it's loud, it's intense, and it really stirs the root chakra and gets that energy moving. And a lot of people in my generation really like that sensation. There's this kind of building up, and it's like a horror movie or a haunted house where there's a lot of surprises and excitement, and it's building up like constantly, I can't think of the word, but anyways, I talked about that in a prior presentation, and someone in my generation said, there's something more than just the scariness in it. There is that power element, and there is an identification with that type of intensity and that power that really comes with that music. You can look it up in your own time. Dubstep is what it's called. Okay. Now, another really important part of this generation is the fact that we're brought up by the majority, majorly by the Pluto Virgo generation, which is creating this intensity, I think. I think there is a friction between this generational gap, in particular, as compared to some other generations, because the Pluto Virgo generation has been spending lifetimes purifying and perfecting and focusing on what's morally right and what's morally not right, and how can I fill my role in the most profoundly functioning and serving and pure way is obviously the Virgo Pluto generation. And so here comes their children, the Pluto Scorpio generation, that is having all these past lives of intensity. They feel like the world is about to end, so you might as well just live it up and have a good time because you never know when everything is going to go to shit the next day. And all of this sexual merging with each other in past lives too. And so the Pluto Virgo generation comes around and says, no, that's wrong. Don't be how you are. You're messed up. This is this is the end of the world, is looking at your own generation. And on the other side of the fence, the Pluto and Scorpio generation having this more moral and left black and white type of upbringing, which is kind of very different than Scorpio, which is the fusion and good and evil and black and white. It becomes really murky and really entangled and virtually comes together at some point. And so this Virgo generation sort of loads the spring of the Scorpio generation, suppression. My own very stereotypical consensus parents, my sex talk was simply, well, Timothy, I heard other Boy Scouts talking about sex, and I just want to let you know that I never want to hear you talking about sex. He couldn't even say the freaking word. It's like so taboo. So it's just like, okay. And so it's just like, I was raised to believe sex is bad. And, I'm still working through a lot of this deconditioning. And many people in my generation, similarly, are going to go through periods of directly confronting this darkness that has been made taboo, or maybe they feel guilty about, or the world. It seems very apocalyptic, and why is everything so dark? And so that can play out in many ways, and I think for many people it leads to escapism and denial. But for many souls in this generation, it creates a dark night of the soul type of situation. And that's important. That's really important for this generation, because that's what's going to provoke many of us to come alive. And ultimately, this is the spring being unloaded, is sort of rebelling. Like we said, we have this Neptune, Uranus, and these Saturn cycles beginning and ending that is about turning over the old patriarchal age. It's like digging the shovel into the earth and turning it over and making the earth fertile for future generations to create new fundamental realities. I mean, the Neptune-Uranus cycle is like the fundamental, what are the ideals and, bare bone skeletons of your reality in idea form, conceptually, even intuitively. It's very right brain type of fundamental changes that this generation is sort of ending and beginning. And so it's that tilling over of the earth. And we also can have some world events here that kind of reflect that tumultuousness of the past lives. Chernobyl happens right at the beginning of the Pluto Scorpio time, where there's a Russian power plant that blew up. The Berlin Wall is the big one that was going on in the midst of these cycles beginning and ending. So there's our symbol of the tearing down of the patriarchal era, with that Berlin Wall going down right before the Neptune-Uranus cycle closes. Columbine happens when this generation is between ages 4 to 15. Clinton's sex scandal happens between ages 4 to 15. These are our role models. This is our world. Our parents are afraid of us going to school. The new millennium happens between ages 5 to 16. There's the Y2K scare. Everybody thinks the world's going to end. And then again later in 2012. And then 9/11 happens. Ages 6 to 17. And this is a devastating, catastrophic event that then leads to all of this senseless wars, as well as conspiracy theories. Who did 9/11 and all these things get circulated into the consciousness. And so this generation, again, just comes in and it's just like, oh, here we go again. Senseless wars, not really sure what's going on, etc. Now, another huge part of this generation and everyone since is the birth of the internet. And you can look there between 1995 and 2000. This is when this generation is between ages 0 and, around 10. This is when the birth of the internet suddenly happens. And the internet is the Wild West. There's no regulations, there's no control. Parents don't know how to deal with it. Most of my teachers said never look to the internet for information because it's all garbage, etc. And this is changing our consciousness, not just for the Pluto Scorpio generation, but generations after. But my generation was the first one to kind of be thrust into that Wild West with, again, very little regulation, very little understanding of what's out there. And there was kind of this fearfulness around it, almost being a young child and parents being uneasy of what you're doing out there and what's regulated and what's not. And of course this leads to the birthing of internet pornography, which I'm just going to say, I'm not seeing hardly anybody talk about this stuff really yet. And this stuff is going to be huge. How this affected consciousness, how it affected me, my generation, and future generations is massive. This is not just looking at magazine pornography. This is suddenly every single conceivable sexual act is distributed all over the place, to the point where even if you're doing some kind of innocent search for your homework assignment, there's orgies and stuff popping up online. And this is new. And the teachers and the parents don't really know what to do with it. So we're sort of coming of age at the same time as there's this huge explosion of internet pornography. Another interesting phenomenon that's happening alongside of this is sexual fetishes, which is something that's still very misunderstood and needs to be explored, because there is this community now of people with sexual fetishes are discovering each other throughout the world. And this is when Neptune and Uranus is in Aquarius, I believe. And there's just like, wow, other people are into shoes and whatever, whatever. It's like every fetish exists out there, and there's tons of websites for them now. And so there is this collective consciousness discovering this whole new world. And pornography basically becomes like a social norm. And this drastically affects my generation and pretty much every generation since forth, because we've done nothing to even call attention to this stuff. There hasn't been studies put out there about how porn affects the mind. That hasn't come, it's only come out in the last several years. And this has been extreme objectification of women, obviously. It's been extremely much messing with the brain chemistry of men and women alike, because I believe it's 1 in 4 women also look at porn now. 12% of the internet, bringing in $10 billion a year. It's just insane. And this is bringing body dysmorphia and eating disorders to the forefront in women as well, because what the ideal image is becomes more and more and more ideal and particular. And so there was just a Cambridge study that was done 2 years ago that is, basically saying that internet porn addiction is the same as drug addiction in how it forms the neural pathways. And in particular, this affects the young people the most who are looking at porn. That's where the brain gets particularly hijacked, is when it's young people looking at it. So anyways, I would love to hear more from the rest of the world on how to resolve this issue, because it seems to be a pretty new one. And so this can be a part of the dark night of the soul that the Scorpio generation is experiencing. It is coming into reality in terms of, oh my goodness, we were born into a world that does not exactly have its shit together. And this is also, it's in this generation, there are detonators, specific souls that are coming here that are going to react, being that loaded spring that has so much passion, so much energy in a world that's been oppressed. This generation is one of the first generations to just be bombarded with, college loan debt and these types of things too. And so there is this blowing up, and I have not seen many souls come to this stage yet. I think we're going to see this through the next decade, as many of these souls being sick of it, coming alive, reacting against the old traditions, the old authorities, taking down these old structures, breaking long-held taboos, and essentially just stirring the pot and causing this chemical reaction that's absolutely necessary in the breakdown of our past history, in allowing new fundamental realities to be sown. And so we're also going to see phoenixes rising from the ashes in this generation as well. And that's the light at the end of the tunnel, is the Pluto polarity point in Taurus, which is the evolutionary work of this generation. Again, this is not work that is necessarily seen by the vast majority in this generation. There will be particular souls who really break through to the other side, which is just like, listen, we need peace and stability on this planet. We are absolutely sick of the restlessness, of the intensity, of the pressure, of the drama, of the distractions. And, it's like the whole pornography thing is interesting, because there is this reflection of all of these souls kind of merging together in this other dimension. And that is complicated. It starts to intertwine and conglomerate all this stuff together. And the Taurus polarity is completely different. Scorpio is like claustrophobic intensity in like a black hole. It's like a singular point of transformation and intensity. It's the point of birth and death. Taurus, on the other hand, is like spaciousness and openness. And so what we're seeing is this generation has the opportunity to unload that spring of passion, to detonate, and then afterwards sort of relax into wider, more spacious, more simple and peaceful dimensions. Through deconditioning, subconscious attachment to the intensity and the discomfort, that we can just sort of reach upper limits, like, oh, peace and stability. Don't know what that's like. I'm going to go back into the point of transformation, And it's like we actually have to decondition these very unconscious programs within ourselves. And this is happening through reorienting towards sense-based programming, relaxation, your body actually feeling good, rather than the intensity or the penetrativeness of that Scorpio passion, relaxing. And so souls in this generation will also be creating forms of self-sustenance based off of natural resources. We're talking about permaculture, forest gardens, city gardening, community gardens, and these types of things. It's going to become important in this transitioning, which is really about creating sovereignty away from outer power influences and authorities. You can take care of yourself, and you can do it easily. And so there is this integration onto this planet, and we can make it work for ourselves, and we can make it simple and easy. And certain souls within this generation may be yearning and initiating that endeavor, really bringing the attention back to Taurus, which is this planet and this earth. And the understanding that it's rather simple here to actually be able to survive. It's the wisdom of the Garden of Eden. I like to think of Taurus, which is just take care of the plants and animals, and you're in paradise. You stick one seed in the earth, the plant comes up with hundreds of more seeds to make hundreds of more plants. Abundance, simplicity, and sensual enjoyment are really natural and easy parts of this planet. And so these souls have been experiencing the opposite of that through many, many lifetimes. And because there can be that, I'm sick of that. We need to change reality fundamentally. There can be a reorientation back to the earth and Taurus in that endeavor. So it looks like we have 10 minutes left, and I would love to hear from anybody if they have any questions before I get back into another Gemini motor mouth tangent.
Timothy, that was fantastic. This is Wendy. Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Oh, good.
Thank you.
Wow, I love that. Thank you so much. I have a younger sister. She's born in 1990. I have another friend, very good friend of mine. She's 26 now or something. And I said to her the other day, I said, your generation is going to create new patterns for us. They're going to create the whole new structure that we need. You know, all that Capricorn you guys have. And I'm love that you all are here. and my nephew too. He's 23. So those are the three people in my life that have Pluto and Scorpio, and they all are really intense, and they're all at different stages of evolution.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it makes a big, big difference, doesn't it? I mean, for really any generation, but yeah.
Yeah, but they're all really cool. Like my nephew's, like I would say, second stage individuated. He is angry. Whoa.
Me too.
He's fucking off at the world.
Yeah.
So, I mean,
didn't have us
anyway,
around until we're raging. Yeah.
Yeah. I was looking at the U.S. chart and thinking of Pluto Scorpio, and it squares the nodes of the U.S. at 6 degrees, Leo and Aquarius. The moon of the U.S. is in Aquarius at 18. So, you know, Pluto with the moon, you can see right through all the crap. Not that anybody can't nowadays, or it's out there. Anyway, I just wanted to say thank you. That was fabulous. Loved listening and learning.
My pleasure.
So,
yeah.
Timothy, it's Linda here. Have you had experiences in the Pluto polarity point of Taurus? Is that kicking in for you, or do you find it still a bit too boring to go there?
Oh, man. I got to tell you, I'm really working with that reverberation because I have my own nodes, south nodes in Leo, 7 degrees Leo, north nodes in Aquarius, and then moon is in Taurus opposite my Pluto. And my Pluto and moon are my skipped steps. So that's what I'm really trying to do, is integrate that moon in Taurus. And I have found ways. I have tapped into that reality. I have had glimpses of it, and it's fascinating when I do. And I'm going to explain it to you because I think that this is what we're going to see many people in my generation experience. And that's that I reach an upper limit. It's like my consciousness simply cannot comprehend that things are so calm. It's like I'm sitting here in my home, you know, wearing luxurious clothes in front of a fire and everything's good. And it's just like, what? I'm expecting the roof to cave in or something like that. And it's like, this is what I like to call an upper limit. Is it's like I reach points where my consciousness is just like, it's too stable, it's too peaceful, it's too good. And then I will do something to rewind back into the chaos of Scorpio. I'll eat a bunch of candy or do something crazy. You know, it's just like, oh no, it's just like, it's got to like be stirred up again. And it's like, so it's happening in little step by step, I think.
Yeah, thanks, Timothy. My south node's in Taurus, so I'm, the opposite, and my north node's in Scorpio, and I sort of resist the Scorpio a bit, and at night I sort of get scared, and I'm thinking, well, my unconscious is creating this, it's creating, the little nightmares, and so so thanks for sharing that. Wanda, did you want
Which is true.
Yeah.
It is our consciousness that creates those things, despite the reality that they become into. Yeah.
Where you're coming from, I'm heading to, and it's like, oh my gosh, it's so scary. Okay.
And it's interesting because my north node's going into the 8th house. So I'm still kind of sticking with it a little bit too.
Yeah. Okay. Wanda, did you want to say something?
Timothy, I just wanted to say thank you so much for that. And you have, your generation has some allies for those of us, Pluto and Virgos, who have Uranus conjunct Pluto, because many of us, especially born in 1966, have the South Node in Scorpio. So we know exactly where you are coming from. I mean, I was over here going, hallelujah, preach it, brother, because everything you said is, described from many people that I know that also have that South Node in Scorpio.
Mm-hmm.
You all definitely have allies.
I wanted to add to that, Timothy, too, to say that I'm also, of course, Pluto and Virgo, but I have Venus conjunct Pluto with Uranus, so I could really relate to what you just said about stirring the pot. And I think that, not all Pluto and Virgo generation are so tight,
Absolutely.
So,
Absolutely. Right. That's why, thank you for pointing that out, Wanda and Wendy, because as I said at the beginning, it's really, really general. I mean, to say, oh, this is what the Pluto Scorpio generation is in total, and this is what the Pluto Virgo generation is like, of course not. And what we're talking about here is majorly just, this is what Scorpio is. So if you have any Scorpio 8th house Pluto aspects, chances are you're experiencing these dynamics in some way, shape, or form anyways.
Right. But I definitely can just validate. I mean, I can remember my nephew's friend being killed on the bus by a gang member, and just like really radical stuff that we never had to deal with. I mean, we were dealing with sex, drugs, and rock and roll and all kinds of wild stuff, but we weren't dealing with that.
Yeah, and the way that we're going to deal with it is going to be in many, many different ways, shapes, and forms. It could be physical like that. It could be mental. It could be learning about the Holocaust at an early age. It could be a whole multiple of ways of really submerging into this is what reality is, and we're not in the golden age, is really what the deep unconscious understanding is.
I was thinking too that a lot of what's going on now and the people that are kind of acting out with all the racism and et cetera, and or the protests. I mean, these are the Pluto and Scorpio generation people, and Sag, right? The ones that are in school still are Pluto and Sag generation.
Mm-hmm.
But all the generations thereafter, right? Because it takes a while to work out whatever Pluto brought forward in one generation, right? I would say.
Yeah. And, again, the Pluto Scorpio generation is just going through their first Saturn returns until 2025. And these are going to be the years when America has its Pluto return, Pluto going over the South Node of Pluto and all these things. And so that correlation there, I think, is interesting because the world might be in a somewhat transitory, chaotic state. And at the same time, the Pluto Scorpio generation is coming in and feet are touching the ground. Oh, okay, here we are. And coming into authority and stepping up into places of power simultaneously. And so what I have noticed with my own generation is that this has majorly not happened yet. And I am oddly not surprised by the election and where things are looking where they're going to go, because there is this sense of, oh yeah, this makes sense. And this is where things need to go in order for necessary catalysts to really bring up the bullshit that's Scorpio to the forefront so we can change this stuff. And so I noticed that even still, the majority of my generation has been like asleep and not really aware of any of these dynamics. And I think that there's going to be those detonators and sudden realizations and people snapping and coming to life really going on this whole next decade.
Wade, did you want to say something?
Yeah. Hi, Timothy. I just want to say your topic is fascinating. I'm in this generation and strong Pluto Scorpio stuff. And I want to ask you, do you think just the Pluto, especially Pluto conjunct South Node, those generation, this theme can endure so much, like there's such strong suppressed rage. Do you think when it hits the Taurus pointed to survival instinct, they are gonna, like you said, the waking moment, they're gonna do something to create some new, new pattern?
Yeah, I think if it does come to like a survival type of situation, which it may happen in a more philosophical necessarily than physical way, but it would still have the same type of reaction.
Yeah, I don't mean like the world is gonna end, but it's like
right.
personal to them. That's the bottom line, and they're gonna and I also feel you said like the Scorpio, like the intensity. Do you think they go to the intensity and the darkness to kind of, because they have this kind of a need to train their survival skills, they have to go into there, then know they can survive through that darkness or the intensity?
Well, I think that's ultimately what the mastery of Scorpio is going into that intensity and realizing what does survive, and it's the soul. It's the transcendental nature of us that really comes out of the tumbler and lasts. And so what I think is going to be happening is it's the other part of the Scorpio-Pluto generation thing is we sort of have this innate sense of the darkness of the world that's already been there. So we're seeing the darkness of the world that's already been there. And in that regard, it's like the world is catching up to where many of us already have been, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And that can be a part of like, oh, I'm coming alive right now because the world is finally justifying my prior experience.
That's how I feel.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's how I feel. Thank you.
Absolutely. So it looks like we got a minute and a half left.
Yeah. Anyone else?
Timothy, thank you. That's wonderful. I can tell you that everything that that you presented today manifests in my middle son. The other ones, well, two of them have Pluto in Scorpio, but he has Pluto on his ascendant in Scorpio and squaring his nodes widely, but he lives at that edge where everything's got to be so chaotic and difficult. And I try to tell him, Pluto and Virgo, conjunct Uranus, I try to tell him, I say, please take care of yourself. Do things that are good for you, that you love, that are good for you. Don't do things that you love that are bad for you. I can't get through.
Yeah. I feel like a lot of us have to get a lot out of our system first, and that's kind of part of the purging and the transformation process, I guess. So again, maybe party hard and get it all out and then kind of come back into what's the essential. Yeah. Well, thank you so much, guys.
Okay, Timothy, thank you so much. I've just unmuted everyone so we can say thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Yay.
you.
Thank you.